We are live, guys, and thank you for joining us, Pharmacy Informatics Academy. This is Friday, 8 p.m. We do this monthly. This is just kind of a live stream with some of our pharmacy informatics and health tech community. We have today, really proud to say, we have like Dr. Brian Fung, Dr. Dennison Lim, and Dr. Timothy Aungst on the show. And we're just going to talk about a little bit about careers in health tech. So, Tim's going to be on his treadmill. This is kind of the setup or the layup here. We're going to run until Tim drops from his treadmill. That's the idea. So we're going to really be motivating Tim with his calorie count today. But yeah, no, we're looking forward to it. So, maybe get us started here. Brian, thanks for joining in. Brian, obviously you have a lot of advice around health tech in general, but one of the things I've kind of been seeing, and I think a lot of us have been seeing on LinkedIn and in the news, is a lot of layoffs in the industry going on in health tech specifically. And so, we're going to really name any names today. I don't think that's fair, but it's just one of those things like, you kind of think about, what happened in 2006, 2008, what's happening today, maybe different reasons, but, people do kind of get a bit anxious, right, when these things occur. So we kind of want to talk a little bit about, what kind of matters the most when you're, kind of at risk, or if you're, already experiencing a layoff, or even if you're a new grad starting the job search, what are the things that matter the most when you're in that kind of zone, and what your thoughts you have. So maybe we can kind of go down. Actually, let's kind of maybe go down Dennis's list. So Dennis, you had a really great post on LinkedIn recently, and maybe you can kind of go down the list of what you should do and what you shouldn't do as part of that kind of preparation and planning for that next job, right? So, maybe Brian or Dennis, do you want to go first and maybe set us up there?
Yeah, I can go first and kind of contextualize the conversation. So to your point, Beju, I made a post yesterday. Context is that recently I was laid off from my company this past September at the very end of it. It's been about a month and maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks since that. And so I've been pursuing kind of the next opportunity. And, I wanted to present at least my perspective on some of the less commonly discussed themes about being unemployed, especially in, with the impending recession. People always talk about, use your network, reach out to a recruiter. Those are common things that I think most people know and talk about, but there are other things that are more like tactical and just like day-to-day things that I think a lot of people just gloss over that become important parts of putting structure around your day when you're unemployed.
Yeah, it's like you don't really hear the generic kind of things, because you already kind of know that, right? It's like kind of common sense, but what's something that you could actually put into place and take action on?
Yeah.
So I think you guys are, to me, you shared a lot of tips and tricks with me when I was actually on career break. That was really useful, and one of the things that was really useful was staying organized and focused. And there's a lot of tools out there, but there's some specific tools that really can do that the best. And I will, I'll give it hats off to Notion, right? I've used Excel before, but Notion is a next level tool, right? To kind of keep organized and kind of stay on track. Can you tell us a little bit more about that tool in particular, and why that's better than Excel and other tools maybe around?
For me, the ability of Notion, and if anyone hasn't used it, I definitely encourage people to take a look at it. It's how I organize my thoughts. In terms of Notion, for me, kind of the primary feature that really sets it apart from Excel and Google Sheets is when you create any line item in the database, you can essentially on the back end have all the metadata associated with that line item. So if I applied for a job for a particular company, I can then click into the company, put all the metadata around the company, around like, oh, how many, how many people do they have as a corporation, or if they're a startup, which series are they? Notes for my interview, notes for the position, notes around the recruiter and the conversations. You can do all of that in Google Sheets and Excel, but it's just a different level of setup with without the connecting pieces that let you kind of jump around. For me, that was the most valuable part.
Yeah, Excel or Google Sheets is not a database or relational database. So definitely like a lot of benefits there. And like frankly, pen and paper is great, but like some of these tools are really just give you that edge, automate and make you efficient, and then keep you organized. Again, going back to organize and focus. You want to be in that zone, and these tools really help you do that. One of the things I think as part of that is what kind of tools that actually work. When you're reaching out to folks and like recruiters and maybe you're kind of you're going to get a lot of connections probably and a lot of contacts and a lot of follow-ups, and so it's hard to keep track of that. Do you just use Notion, or are there other tools in your toolkit that you can use?
Yeah, I can start, and happy to hear from you too as well, Brian and Tim. But like, um, if you want to think about recruitment from two different silos, right? There is the inbound, people messaging you, and then there's the outbound, you messaging people or applying. And those are two very distinct streams that you have to manage separately. What I noticed is that once I posted like, hey, I got laid off, the inbound was like this wave, this just unmanageable wave of people like, hey, I want to talk to you. Do you have some time on your calendar? And then like you have, 20 other people who want to do the same thing. So I immediately set up a calendar manager. So there are a couple of products on the market. Calendly is probably the market leader, as I understand it. Tons of features in there, especially if you're a business. There's like workflow automation rules and whatnot. I know, Brian, you use Calendly because you just sent me one right before this. For me, like I didn't need all those features, and so I looked at TidyCal. I think it's like $34 for a lifetime subscription. Really, just allowing people to schedule themselves and knowing when you are open, without all the overhead associated with here's my calendar. Let me type out my calendar. It's such a rudimentary, like 19th century requirement or task.
Right.
So that's kind of one tool I want to talk about, but I don't know, Brian, if you have some perspective.
Yeah, do you guys use Calendly or TidyCal or any of these tools a lot? Just even for networking, not even for job searching, but do you use it for other kind of uses as well?
I mean, I can go into it. It's like, Brian, you go first. Go.
I'll try to be quick. I've been using Calendly for about 4 years now. More so because I do a lot of random stuff, but it makes workflows super easy. And then to Dennis's point, if we talk about job recruitment, when I was searching for jobs, I think every recruiter was like, I wish every applicant had this. There was no back and forth. It was like, here's your Calendly, and they just schedule it. Super simple, but I don't have much to add. Tim?
Do you guys all use like the same calendar for your entire life? Like, I feel like I'm bouncing between like multiple myself. Like, I have Microsoft Enterprise from my university. They have my own personal calendar, stuff like that. Even like my wife's calendar. So it's like trying to like balance all those types of things. So for that reason, I've had trouble with trying to use this kind of stuff because it's like some things don't come over very easily. I like when people send me calendar links, but I will admit sometimes when I get that link, I like stop and I'm like, I'll come back to this, and like I forget to engage with the rest of that conversation. Has it happened to you guys? Like you send that link and like nothing happens afterwards?
That's actually a really good point. I wondered why I sometimes don't get any like traction off of the links. And by the way, I put links in my email signature at work, so it's like I have that as well. Like for outreach for work, and that usually doesn't really work well for some clients. and I wonder why that is. And so it could be, it could be kind of like, it could be another Tim out there, right? Like it's kind of like really, has multiple calendars and maybe doesn't have the time, to kind of reach out and look at it and then reach out. So yeah, that's a really good point, Tim. You got to be careful how you use these tools. Sorry, Dennis, you were going to say something. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's definitely a key, is like, making sure your calendar is synchronized. There's also other tools that you can use to kind of like synchronize all your calendars. You can use a little bit of automation in there. It does get a little bit complex. So that's for a discussion for another time. But, it's a really good point. Like there are sort of like the pros and cons of these tools as well. And I think you actually hit the nail on the head there with one. So actually that goes into maybe a good segue into like email. And so like, how do you, Dennis, as you kind of like started receiving a flood of, potential offers, or, kind of recruiters getting at you on email, like, or in LinkedIn, I mean, how would you kind of leverage email? I think you kind of mentioned there was a pitfall you kind of faced with your email. So kind of walk us through the process, what you kind of went through and how you kind of solved for it.
I don't know that I solved for it yet, but
okay, all right.
I
Still
will
to
say
be.
that in retrospect, in hindsight, if you are in an event where you're expecting to really have a lot of recruiters reach out to you, just set up a separate inbox. I think right now I spend a lot of my day sorting through all the junk that comes through my normal email, making sure I don't miss like a call for interview or any kind of follow up that's needed. So that wastes way too much of my time. So if you're searching for one or two jobs, I think that's manageable. If you're searching across multiple jobs while you're unemployed, definitely I think set up a separate email or use a less frequently used email so that it's not popping into like all in between like a Chipotle in like advertising, because like Chipotle will just throw my mind off track and I just want to order something, but like I really need to be like focused on what they're sending me. And so that was kind of my lesson learned. So if I get unemployed again at some point, I'm going to set up a separate email.
Oh my God. Yeah. Especially those food coupons, total distraction. Right?
Free guac this week, man.
Oh
Well,
my
I think we
God.
figured out the secret right there. If I want your attention, I should put in a header like, free Chipotle, and then hide my message.
BOGO burrito bowl. You got me.
There we go.
What a great recruiting tool. That's great.
Tip for the recruiters.
That's right. Yeah. Don't take any of my recruiters' businesses, I guess.
This podcast not sponsored yet by Chipotle.
That's right. That's right. Well, yeah, actually, and in fact, that's something that I have. I keep on hearing on and off is like, in healthcare at least, there's a lot of health systems and healthcare clinics that, and providers also that they are having a hard time recruiting. And so like when you kind of look into like extension of healthcare tech, I would imagine that to be the same, right? Like, getting the right fit and cultural fit, but also right skill fit for the company is probably incredibly hard as it is. And so, on the other side of the equation, like, so you're on one side of the equation, you're looking at like, what's the supply of employers, but on the other side of the equation, it's more like what's the supply of really good candidates that might, and then within that, a subset of who actually fits and is a good fit for the company is probably even smaller. And so, you think about this is definitely something that something to keep in mind, because you're going to be applying to a lot of jobs, and you probably already did apply to a ton of jobs. I don't know, more than 200. I'm just assuming here at this point, but like, at what point does persistence and patience pay off? What kind of tips would you guys give in that sense? Should people just kind of knock on 1,000 doors and not give up, or like what's for someone starting out, what kind of advice do you guys would you give? Because end of the day, you may get a lot of rejections, right? But is that all? Like, is that the only thing to look out for? There has to be more, right? So yeah, what in your experience, what's kind of a good way to kind of give yourself advice that you would have wanted when you first started that job search?
I can try to start this one off. Maybe a couple of things. I think most of the experience here was learned from 6 months ago when I was applying. And I think the first thing was I applied to a lot of jobs. I just black hole. Did not hear back from majority of them. And I think one of the first things I learned, I actually think I learned it from Dennis, was about utilizing referrals was a big one.
Oh,
And I was tracking all my job applications, and it was pretty obvious that when you used a referral, that it was higher likelihood of interview. Maybe this is just like obvious, but it was very overtly apparent when I was not hearing back from any application versus when I got a referral. So that's the first thing, is being more intentional with the jobs you apply to versus just applying. Maybe it feels good to apply, but referrals make a big difference. And then the second thing is probably also because of Dennis, the the warm connections made a pretty huge difference. So aside from referrals, when you make that warm connection to someone else, I also found that that was like a very high chance of leading to an interview of some kind. So I guess the big takeaway in general is just being much more intentional versus just like blindly applying across the board.
yeah. And just to clarify, Brian, like when you say warm connections, you're talking about connections within that company that maybe, maybe not the actual hiring manager,
It-
or could be both, I guess. Well,
It could be both. The specific example I was thinking of was when Dennis specifically introduced me to individuals himself. So he would make the actual like warm handoff between myself and someone else, and I
Okay.
found that was very successful in leading to something afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very human, right? Power of connection, I think. And frankly, this is how I also have gotten basically all the jobs I've got is like through really great either mentors or really great colleagues, or just those warm handshakes, I would call them, or virtual handshakes in some cases, led to a lot of good things. So at least expedited some of the interview process as well. So that's really good. So I like the fact that you said intentional. So maybe we should be intentional about also how do we spend our day in the job hunt, right? Day to day. So kind of like what Tim's demonstrating for us right now is like staying on a daily exercise regimen, right? Like we probably need like a regimen for work or job hunting, right? As well. And so like what does that look like? I mean, you probably do want to carve out some time for a treadmill or rowing machine or whatever. Like that's definitely a must. I need to get better at that. To be honest, I'm horrible and still need to work my way into rowing. But what are the other kind of things that you have to kind of keep in mind to stay organized and keep a good schedule for your day?
I do want to
And
piggyback on something Brian just said
go
though
for it.
about warm intros. Like I've been burned on this because with a decade like working in multiple companies, serving on multiple ad boards, consulting, meetings and such. I've made intros to people, and you do that whole thing like, hey, here's so and so. I want to intro you. This is my friend, partner, VP, whatever, director of XYZ division, and then I see the person I refer back like blow it. They like blow it in that response. I'm just like, why did you do that? Like, and then I get like the returning like, who's this guy? And it's like, yeah, now I have to fight for you, and I don't know if I'm gonna be investing this time because like these warm intros, like you don't waste those things, because I've seen people do that, and it breaks my heart because I'm just like, that was your first in, and if you can't even respond effectively, it's like, yeah, you're gonna not have a good time.
Well, actually, that's a really good point. And, I want to just mention like Maggie Chen sort of threw a really good comment in the chat. So, yeah, how close do you think a relationship should be for one to ask for a referral? And to Tim, Tim's point is actually, if you have a close relationship, you don't want to also do the opposite, right? You don't want to like kind of worsen that relationship because you're not doing any follow through or whatever. But also, like, it's a good point. But Maggie, I honestly, my personal belief is like, I'd like to make sure my relationships are fairly close before I even ask for anything. I want to continue to give something back to my relationships. And like, if I'm always asking for something, like that's no good, right? So you don't want to come from that mindset. But I think it depends on the individual and what that relationship looks like, to be honest. So I don't know. Do you guys have any like thoughts around Maggie's question?
Lots of thoughts. But Tim, would you like go?
Yeah, like, I mean, maybe all of us have been there. I mean, how many of us have received a LinkedIn message saying, "Hey, I'm interested in XYZ industry. I see you're friends with XY, or you've been partnered with this, and like, can you like give me a name in there?" It's kind of like, where'd you come from? Like, I don't know you yet. I don't know if I want to make that intro yet. So I think like, I don't personally like, Beiju talks about like, I'm on this treadmill. I take a lot of like, I talk to a lot of people in the evenings. Last night I was talking to a PGY1 that was asking about career advice, and it's like, yeah, let's just talk about as we go through this, and let me understand what you're trying to do, because your original question you may have asked may have not been the best question based on just talking it out. And I think that's the key thing. It's like just asking for an intro without like even have a good background of the person you're asking to is not going to be a good success, I think, too.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Most recently, even with one of our colleagues and friends that I wasn't previously connected to, but I think a couple of you were like, "Hey, why don't you ask him for an intro to this company?" My perspective is, because I've been on the other side of that request, was that if you're just brand new cold calling for a referral, that's really not like the best move. It just, from Tim's perspective, like, you're out of nowhere. I don't know your background. I don't know your skill set. Even if I did do a referral, usually that referral comes with like a question like, what capacity have you worked with this person? What do you know about their work ethic or their skills? And I can't answer any of that for you. And so in those cases, there is a spectrum of potential activity you can do that's not a referral. Like, referral is one formal process. There are other processes, for example, that you could potentially ask for, or none of it at all. For example, you can just you can apply to the job regularly and just have that person ping a recruiter and just say, "Hey, this is a potentially good candidate." That is probably like one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is, have the person just reach out to the hiring manager and just say, "Hey, I think this is a great candidate as well, and these are the reasons why." It doesn't have to be a referral. That is a very formalized process at most companies. So there are other ways to approach it that are softer and less like obtrusive, in your face, give me a referral kind of thing, which for the people receiving it, it's like, I don't know who you are. And so that was actually my strategy with one of our colleagues. And, I even told him, I was like, people ask me to ask you for a referral, but I just want to have a conversation. And you do with that what you want, and nothing. We're just talking, and please don't interpret this as a request for referral.
So I have two thoughts that I'd share here. The first is to Tim's original comment too about warm handoffs. I have been burned in the past as well, and warm introductions is very rare for me. I rarely make warm introductions for anyone unless I know you very well. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the tech industry, I think, looks at referrals slightly different in the sense that what I've come to find with following like tech folks and stuff like that is everyone likes to go on Blind to ask for a referral. And if you're not familiar with Blind, it's like the anonymous Reddit. And if you go on there, I can guarantee you every single thread has someone asking for referrals, and underneath it would be like, DM me for a referral here, DM me for a referral. And the reason why is because in a lot of these tech companies, they get large kickbacks. They don't care. They get a big kickback. If you don't get accepted, no one cares. So I think the tech company looks at that a little differently. Now, when it comes to me personally, I actually don't ask for referrals if I don't know the person. It may be like an informational talk or something like that, but I never straight up asked for a referral unless someone actually offers like, hey, if you like a referral, I'd be happy to do that. I personally don't ask for referrals.
Yeah. And it's your time at the end of the day, right, Brian? Like, it's like, how much time do you want to spend? Just to clarify, like, tech companies do give it financial incentives for referrals when they hire. Usually what I've seen is when they hire folks on board to actually find a candidate and they take them on, right? And then that's where you get the kickback or the financial incentive, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, just to be clear. So yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think that's a valid point, but goes back to the point of like, companies are also trying to find the right candidates, and it's hard for them to also do that without help. And so this is a good way for them also in return, right? So there's ROI on both sides, I suppose. But that's a really good point. So, I think, and Dennis, I just wanted to just reiterate your point real quick. Also, I've got DMs, from some of my connections as well, and often I hear that, people just want to find out who the hiring manager is, or find out what the team is like, even. And so those are not really the referrals I think Meg is talking about, but it's more of like a good way to kind of give back to the community. So if it's someone who you might know, or maybe acquaintance from the past, that you want to reconnect with and help out, yeah, that's not a bad thing to do either. You don't have to like, put yourself in the referral firing line, I suppose. It's really just more of like, hey, this is some guidance for you. Do as what you will with it, right? Kind of deal. And I've done that a number of times myself. So it's minimal time for me, minimal effort, but it's also helped someone out, at least towards the next kind of outcome they're hoping to achieve. So go ahead.
Can I add to this? So, like, I think Brian, you and me have taken some approaches to this because we get asked a lot. I think we all do, but I've started, when I get messages that are very generic, I've started like pointing towards like a YouTube video that I've done in the past, or article I've written in the past. It's like, I think, Brian, you have like a frequently asked questions. It's like, because we get some of these same questions over and over again. We're just like, you know what? I've made resources for this. Watch that or do that first, and then come back with more finer tuned questions so we can actually approach this effectively.
Yeah, not much to add to that. I have that FAQ section or videos for that exact reason.
Yeah, check out Brian's website, by the way. This is a good segue. Brian, maybe you could kind of mention your just kind of your course, and maybe how you can maybe use that as a resource for folks who are interested in getting into health tech, and maybe kind of just give us a quick review of it.
Yeah, I try to be brief because I don't like to sell. But there's two things here. The first is a free course, and I put that together because, to Tim's point, I think one of the most common questions I get is like maybe 5 messages a day about, hey, I want to go into tech. I'm a clinician. What did you do to learn? And I'm like, I get that question so much. So it's a course I have that is like upskilling technical skills for clinicians, and it's literally the courses I've taken, and I add a little bit of commentary to why I'm learning it. So the main gist of that is like SQL courses, Python and R, technical writing, GitHub, and Agile. Those are like the main things that I cover in like the courses I have personally taken and why I find value in them. So it's free. You can go check that out. The other one is like a course that is paid, so I won't spend less time talking about this. It's just sharing my experience about what I found helpful and not helpful in getting into health tech, most of which we're talking about now. That's it.
Yeah, and to all honesty, I had no idea, some of the concepts that I had to learn over the course of like the few years that I've been in healthcare. But like those are definitely the core kind of concepts, and I think it's good to have those perspectives. So Tony just said, yeah, he sends people to Brian's resources all the time. So yeah, Tony, if you wouldn't mind like shooting the link to the resource, the website, that'd be really awesome. But thank you. Yeah, Brian, I really, applaud your kind of, I don't think it's selling. I think it's actually giving value back to the community, because, if I was in the same shoes, maybe 2-3 years ago, and I had no idea of some of these concepts, I think it would be really helpful, to be honest. It took like at least 6 months to get familiarized with some of these concepts and some of these terms that people use in health tech. What's an ARR, right? Like what's SQL? Like what's all these kind of acronyms? Sure, maybe you've come across it through an MBA program or whatever, but like it practically speaking, you don't really like let it sink in until you're in the company, kind of seeing this, in meetings and hearing about this, through projects. So, I think highly recommend, kind of, folks who are new to health tech, who aren't familiar with some of these terms, to definitely check it out. We'll put a link into the comments here as well as when we can. And then, Tim, maybe kind of shifting gears a little bit to sort of like your perspective from the academic side of things, because, we have like peers and, colleagues who are pharmacists already in the field. But, what are the thoughts from the field in terms of the students who are just graduating? Are they thinking about careers in health tech? Is that even a thought? And if they are, kind of what goes through their minds, like, on kind of some of this stuff, where to find help, resources, things of that nature. So like what's kind of the general sense going on in the College of Pharmacy as students are getting out and leaving the nest, so to speak?
I'm increased to see most students don't want to do community, especially in retail. So, they're going either on their IFPs or APPs, and that's like the activation for them. They're like, I don't want to do that. What can I do besides that? And then they start Googling, and, they're going to come across many different things. And for me, what's turned into is like, okay, well, what do you want to find? Like APHA has like a career finding kind of thing that they can go and do, but it's kind of like very generic and older. It needs some updates, I would say. But what you end up finding is that, students are like, well, what are the different careers out there? And they do stumble upon, health tech, and they start asking questions like, what is this? And I think that's where they struggle, because most of faculty tend to be like, it's pharm sciences or it's pharm practice, and the pharm practice people all did residency. So we're biased, and we're going to tell them, your only three career choices: staffing, fellowship for industry, or residency for clinical. So like finding something else like managed care, informatics, health tech, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like they have to explore it on their own. And I think that's the hardest point then, is like, what are trusted resources? We talk about evidence-based medicine, but it's like, what's a trusted resource about how to get a job? Who do you go to? Who do you follow? And I also think, school's not about the grades you make, it's about the hands you shake. And that's why I encourage, like, find someone who's doing something and do an intro talk with it. Learn from them. At least you're in a protected environment where you can do this network. We want to get back to the community, so that's helpful. But I think that's where I struggle, is like, students are constantly like, where do I want to go with my life? And what do I do? And where do I find that out? And unless they find a mentor that can help them, they're going to struggle at the end of the day.
Yeah, and mentors have been important, I think, in all of our lives so far, and I don't think that's going to ever, stop. But getting mentors is hard sometimes for some of the schools and some of the students who are a little disconnected from this world of health tech. So that's a really good point. And by the way, we should have like kind of put a blood pressure cuff or monitor on you while you're training, because I hate to ask you that question, because I know sometimes like it can be a stressful thing, because you do a lot of teaching in digital health, frankly, and you are very connected to the industry, right? And so naturally, I'm sure you have learners and mentees coming to you, but it's hard to, I'm sure it's hard to kind of guide everyone that's coming to you as well. So how can you kind of scale that advice, and what are you doing to scale that advice? I guess I should probably ask.
I mean, that's why I tried doing a lot of talks. I tried doing these kinds of things. Like, that's what we've been trying to do, like, the evening talks that you and me have gone on.
Yeah.
I've been trying to open it to people like, hey, just reach out if you want to talk about like this stuff. Like, I want to. I think it's just like, at what scale can I help people for that? Like, what's a very generic like intro versus like, okay, let's talk about career advancement. And that gets multifaceted, I think. So I think finding someone who wants to give the time for you at the end of the day. Time is a commodity we can't bank, and that's hard to ask of people. But you will find people who are willing to offer that. And I encourage, like, if someone turns you down, find someone else. Keep looking, and eventually someone's going to give you that time, and you'll have that success. I think that's where students don't like being, especially a lot of students we currently are getting. They don't like being rebuffed. They're like, oh, maybe I'm not good, maybe something's wrong with me. It's like, no, it's just a working environment. You got to keep talking to people and reading. I think it's lifelong education. You have to show that you have that ability to want to consume information, analyze it, use it, and process it. Like, I had a student that reached out from another school, and she's like, I've been listening to your stuff, I've been following your stuff, I want to ask you questions. Like, I value that because, like, okay, you showed initiative, let me help you. That's where I want to help. And I think that's what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, ask questions, but also like show that you're willing to do some work behind those questions. I think is important. I like that, and I think I get a sense of like folks who are apt to do that. Like I tend to also be gravitated towards them and try to push them further. Dennis, you've kind of actually recently you've been helping a lot of folks out. You've been helping some students out, but also some pharmacists as well out into looking at careers into product management, because you obviously built that experience from the ground up. Maybe kind of share just with the audience. Could you share a little bit more about what product management is as it pertains to kind of through the lens of the pharmacist, and share maybe kind of some of the things you've kind of been able to share with your kind of peers and mentees?
Yeah, it's a great question. So product management is a pretty broad category of responsibilities. I would say, from my perspective, product manager is really about, finding the voice of the customer and then using that voice to build products. So this can be software or hardware that really meet the needs and in particular meets the need of a market. So when we think about product management, it's typically in for-profit companies. I know a lot of pharmacists come from a background of academic center and academia, and so product isn't as kind of conscious on their minds. But in general, you're trying to essentially, create something that somebody was willing to pay for because it solves a problem. And so product at the intersection of like pharmacy or healthcare is really this health tech that we're talking about. How do we create healthcare software that is able to allow a patient to see their doctors quicker, or lower the cost of medications, or help them with their mental wellness. So really broad categorically, and then so many different responsibilities within it. But you're right. I have been looking at helping pharmacists transition to the space. Kind of my pearls from our discussion is always that the vocabulary that's used in product management and in tech in general is very different than vocabulary that we use in pharmacy. And even things that we do in pharmacy that are very product management adjacent, we don't think of it as valuable because we think of it as kind of like the typical aspect of our job. But in product management and in tech in general, you put terminology and vocabulary in there. And I think that's the number one issue for candidates that want to break into tech, is that they don't have the narrative and they don't have the vocabulary to describe what they're doing. And so you, as an applicant, are a much riskier proposition versus like, a general, like someone that has already had product management experience, but maybe not a healthcare experience.
Right. No, that's really important. And by the way, you stepped into product management right after leaving Mayo. So like as an informatics pharmacist into product management. So that was interesting itself. And maybe that's a different set of skills, perhaps. Also, maybe you had a bit of an advantage in some respects. But yeah, knowing the sort of vocabulary and how to kind of like communicate your ideas to all stakeholders, I think is really important, because you're creating a product and you're going to market with it, right? And you have to know the whole spectrum how to do that and work with all these people that you don't really are obligated or like directly involved with. you have to kind of make that work, right, cost functionally. So it's interesting. It's really interesting that you're able to take that leap. You're able to like successfully create a role and see some really great outcomes out of that. And then you're now off to the races with another product management role or similar, I would say, right? And so good for you, man. This is like really powerful. And so yeah, I guess, maybe we'll have a course, maybe not in the future, Dennis, but at least we'll have, like, if anyone's interested, like who's a pharmacist working towards maybe seriously working towards product management, they can reach out to you and perhaps maybe get your thoughts on some of their work so far. So that might be good. Brian, you kind of didn't really take the product management route, did you? You sort of went a little bit different direction. And I'm still trying to understand like your role, but sort of a health data architect is really official role. But like, from an informatics pharmacist to that role, was it as seamless, or was it very different, I guess, from a transitional kind of perspective? And we're talking about like if pharmacists want to get into that or similar type of roles, I guess.
Yeah. It is much different than I had anticipated, but maybe even before jumping into that, I think I was looking heavily into product first myself. But a big
okay.
shift in thinking is that in pivoting to health tech, there's a lot more technical aspects to it. And I think if I were to ever be a product manager or any type of leader in health tech, and maybe folks may disagree with me here, I think it's important to know the nitty gritty, boots on the ground detail to be a really good leader. And maybe it's something just personal. I like to build things. And whenever I am leading things or creating some type of strategy around something, I like to know just everything that happens on the floor. So data architect really gets deep into the weeds where you're engineering the atomic pieces of data in a product. And so I wanted to use this opportunity to learn more myself and then eventually maybe pivot into a product role. So that's the first part. And then the second thing is it's much harder because it's technical skills. Data architect is a very standard term. Did you say wait?
No, I was gonna say way harder, right? Like way harder for the technical perspective.
Well, yeah. I mean, folks who probably come from a technical background might not think as hard, but someone coming from pharmacy who perhaps may not have as much technical training may think it's hard. But data architect as a whole is a pretty standard job in tech roles or just businesses in general. Most of them do some type of architecting of the ETL, extract, transform, load process. So all the technical skills that go into the ETL process, I was familiar with, but never did. And now I'm in a role where I have to do. So it was extremely challenging in learning how to like reconcile data from multiple sources. How do we transform that? How do we load that? And that required technical skills like SQL, Python, and R. So,
wow, that's amazing. So the true roadmap is you at some point you'll be using those tools and sort of skills that you've acquired to more of a strategic role with building products. And while you said, by the way, you love building products or building, I was just thinking of Tim and sort of all the Lego pieces around his basement right now. And yeah, I didn't want to mention that. Like right before this, Tim was giving me the grand tour of his basement. Ton of toys. It's like a toy room. Like it's amazing. So yeah, I guess that's what parent life does to you. But I think yeah, heart. I think Brian. I feel like I am a builder of sorts, a maker perhaps. I always had this inclination of like knowing how to build, but I think the other part is, as a product manager, you can work with a team who can also do the technical building and kind of the work. It's good to know those pieces, right? Have those insights, but also playing with the strengths of your team, I think, is equally as important. At the end of the day, I can't be as good as my marketing team, for example, just because I know SEO, but I'm not really great at it. I could be really great at it, but then I'll shift my focus right into something completely different, maybe into product marketing, which is what we'll cover in another topic. This is the thing, by the way, guys. So this is as part of the Pharmacy Informatics Academy, we really want to shed the light on all these different career paths. These folks are going through, have started to go through, or have begun, and just like see what options are there. Because to Tim's point, really, it's up to us as a community to kind of share some of these insights from the industry, because faculty may not have the most up-to-date experience in some of these areas. Tim, certainly you do, because you do consult with a lot of companies around this space, but or you have our community here to kind of talk about it. But ultimately the students and our peers and colleagues really don't have any of these insights, and it's something that we are passionate about. We want to share these things because it's something that we really didn't have before, kind of to lean on or to refer to. So, and to see pharmacists really succeed in these roles, I think, is important. So, anyway, it kind of goes back to like Dennis's post, and everyone check out Dennis's post on LinkedIn. Give him a like, comment, support Dennis on this journey here. But I really liked your point that you mentioned, which was your life isn't defined by your job, so it shouldn't be defined by your lack of one. So hit your personal goals, right? Like you mentioned, 5K, marathon, reading books, hobbies, side hustles, classes, whatever. I haven't done any of, well, I haven't done the first part of some of those, but anyway, like hit some of the other goals, right? Because I mean, I think this is it. Like there's a lot to do and lot of problems to solve as well, personal and professional, and this is only one facet of it. So I really resonated with that, because I was on a career break just recently as last year, and one of the things that I think really enjoyed was having to do some of these other kind of having these other goals to kind of the other challenges I'm supposed to do as well. So but yeah, we one thing, just kind of on the last note, like I did want to say, as part of your job search or your career break or what have you, don't forget finances, right? And I guess what better way to ask about those life tips than from folks who've kind of gone through the same. Dennis, what's the biggest takeaway from your perspective? What have you kind of learned as far as staying on top of the financial piece?
Unsubscribe from Netflix. They should fix that.
That's great. That's great. What is that, like 20 bucks a month now or something? Like,
bro, the 4K one is so expensive, man. You gotta
really?
You gotta downgrade your life to the ad supported version for like $7 now, man. Just
just cancel it.
no, I mean, so it depends on where you are in kind of like your entryway into this job searching time period of your life, right?
Yeah.
If you're unemployed, you're gonna have to be, much more drastic in what you cut. Fortunately, my expenses are low, and so I'm not too worried. Now, if I had a family to support, if I have kids, that's a totally different level of freak out versus like just me hanging out by myself. If you are searching for a job while still employed, that's a different scenario. If you're a student and a new grad and you have student loans coming and you're searching for a job, that's also a very different dire scenario. So the thing that I think about is like assess your financial situation, understand quote unquote a runway, and health tech, Beiju, right? We always talk about runways. Essentially, it's how much money we have until like it all crashes and burns. Figure what that is. Be realistic about having a budget, and then calculate your runway. I think that informs like how aggressive you need to be, like, different levels of aggressiveness, from like just cold messaging a million recruiters a day, and applying to 100 jobs a day, versus like, you know what, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to spend 2 hours a day, apply to what I can, reply to what I can, and that's it. So like, and that informs, I think, how much you can spend on your professional growth time, which I think you always should be doing, especially if you have free time, and your personal growth time, like, things, with the family, with any significant others, home life, etc. Um, because it is like, if especially if you're not working, it is a very unstructured day. And for people who have been working, not having structure is really weird. Like, I remember like my first day unemployed, I just woke up in my bed like, it is 10 o'clock and I have nothing to do today. So that wasn't a good feeling, and I didn't want to feel like that again. And so I started putting structure in my day, and living it with intentionality about what I was doing for the day.
Yeah,
That
we'll see
cost of living stuff, that cost of living, I feel like I have had, probably 200 plus AFIs over the course of my career. It's like, I always spend one day talking about, post grad considering this stuff. And like, I would say about 10% of the students that I've come across, I actually know what a budget is, what cost of living is, stuff like that. And it's like, you can open an Excel document and there's blank documents that you can actually build this stuff out. I will sit with students like, you need to think about this. Like, I encourage students, like, think about like, just like a 3-month cost of living, at least bare minimum, to have just for, the emergency that could have come up. And I think that really is really important, just thinking about that way. Finances, that'll hit you real quick.
Yeah, and I'll just put a plug out there, not sponsored in any way, but there's a website called youneedabudget.com. Brian, who is by far the most stubborn person I've ever met in my life, before I was able to convince Brian to use it, which says a lot, in terms of its usefulness and value to people. If you're in a position where you have a lot of like debts and reoccurring payments, it is by far, I think, the best tool to understand essentially your cash flow, running your life like a business, what's going in, what's coming out, when is it happening, and very quickly be able to estimate like what a runway looks like for you. If you're independently wealthy, it may not have a lot of value, but I think most of us, especially out of pharmacy school and pharmacy school debt, could use something like that.
Yeah, and those are really great points. And like if you have the ability to work part-time, there's always like transitionary periods where you can like kind of progress into other roles, or pivot into other roles, but you can use that transitory like part-time PRN kind of work as a way to kind of financially buffer yourself. And again, we're not all like financial experts. Any of this is like pure entertainment value, but it's also like our experience, some of our experience as well. So it's kind of like, take that with a grain of salt. But one pro tip that I think Justin mentioned was you can actually, I don't know, you probably have to talk to your CPA, but you may or might be able to like use some of your job search or expenses as part of your tax tax benefits or tax return sort of incentives. So write-offs. Yeah. So I haven't looked into that, but like I feel like that's pretty neat if you can do that. So there's a lot of, I guess, interesting things you don't really know about until you're in that position. So it's probably better to just like prepare yourself or at least read more about it before you kind of before you're already there. And if you're already there, then hey, maybe add that to your schedule, right? Learn more about how to improve your financial health in general. So really great stuff. I'm just kind of curious where Tim's at with his calorie count. Tim, give us a little bit of I didn't get your baseline, so that's probably bad of me, but
I'm trying to do between 4 and 6% incline at 3 miles per hour walk. So right now I'm at 840 calories.
Okay.
I'll screenshot this and I'll put it under the comments when we're all done.
8:40? How long have you been on the treadmill? That's actually a lot.
It's only 54 minutes. That's a lot.
That does seem
I
a lot.
started. I'm at 70 minutes right now.
Oh.
Oh,
You know what?
shit.
Here's the thing, though.
Wasn't enough.
I think the one thing that is hard with, like, lots of us like tracking through heart rate, and this comes back to like, this is like the health tech stuff I have to figure out. I have postural tachycardia syndrome, so I have a higher elevated heart rate than most people. I think it screws up a lot of calculations. So like, I think it overestimates by about 30%, 40% how many calories I burn, because it's like, oh, your heart rate is like averaging like on here like 140 beats per minute, whereas I know for someone else it's probably like 110. So that is the thing I have to figure out. So I don't know. I'm the oddball.
Before, real quick too, before I forget, because Dennis plugged YNAB or Unit of Budget. If anyone wants a referral, I can send you a link.
No. If you're using my link,
I love
you
it.
get a free month if you use my link.
No,
and,
you cannot steal the referral.
Feel free to.
Brian.
I will. You know what? I'll squash this. I'll I'll set up a link. Like I'll send all referrals to me. Then how about that? Like that sounds like a good gaming game. But no, just kidding. No, how do you spell it? By the way, how do you spell?
It's literally youneedabudget.com or YNAB. Yeah.
Okay.
And no, you cannot reach out to Brian for a referral on this. If anyone does, you're automatically blocked from my life.
Well, this has been that's been a turn of events. So I love the competitiveness here between Brian and Dennis.
I need my free month, man. I'm unemployed. You can't steal it from him. Think of the children.
You can give it to Dennis.
Yeah, fair point. I think Dennis has got that one now. Yeah, exactly.
Fair point.
Well, I just wanted to thank everyone that kind of joined, or if you're listening after the recording, please, send us a comment if you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn, just to show, your appreciation. But also, like, if you have any comments for us, I'd love to kind of hear from you and, give you any insights that we may have. Blair, yeah, thanks for joining from the Virgin Islands, no less. Really great comment here. You're a pharmacist that transitioned from health informatics, health tech, or into health tech. So I'm glad you made the move as well. Keep us posted on your progress as well. So we'd love to hear from you. But everyone, thank you for joining us. Dennis, Brian, Tim, really appreciate your insights and your giving back to the community here. You're doing this out of your own time. And so, it just says a lot about you guys, your character and your level of mentorship. I'm not going to say anything about your level of maturity because that's a different matter, but I think it's all fun and games here, right? So thank you guys. Really appreciate your time. And we'll sign out. So please join us next Friday or next month and last Friday at 8 p.m. for more.
Cool.